First, I want to tell you about the history of London. It was founded by the Romans, who named it Londonium in 43 AD, and there is indication that people had lived there for a while before they settled on this land. They built a wall that stretched all the way around their city, and they began to run trading businesses through the town after they constructed bridges and roads to go across the River Thames. The Romans eventually left in the 5th century, but throughout the next years, the city began to pick back up and it became very commercial. It's crazy to think that a city founded 2,000 years ago started with nothing and is now the most popular tourist destination in the world. By the 11th century, London was easily the biggest city in England, and Frank Stanton around this time said it had the resources and it was rapidly developing the dignity and political self-consciousness appropriate to a nation's capital. By 1100, London's population was around 1800, and by 1300 was around 18,000, and by 1300, its population had grown to over nearly 100,000. However, the plague, also known as the Black Plague, in the 14th century took out nearly a third of its population. In the 17th century, London was plagued again, but this time it was much worse and killed over 100,000 people in a year. When London thought things were bad, in 1666, the Great Fire of London broke out and nearly burned their city to the ground. It took over 10 years to rebuild, and on top of rebuilding, they added more bridges and expanded more over the River Thames. Going forward into the 18th century, law enforcement became very popular. Many crimes became punishable by death, such as petty theft, and many people in the city struggled to hold on. During this time, many children died before their 3rd birthday. Jumping forward into our century, in 2015, London was the most visited city in the world. It's said to have over 65 million visits, and one of those was mine. In the fall of 2015, I traveled with a group from my school called Traveling Classroom. For 10 days, we pilgrimaged across 4 countries, one of them being London, England. While in London, I spent 3 days walking around the city, admiring the architecture and landmarks it's known for. London was actually smaller than I thought it would be. From one spot, you could stand there and look around and see pretty much everything you've read about in the movies and books. It's all at a walking distance, and to be specific, it's a short walking distance. Standing in the grass beside Westminster Abbey, you're also standing in the grass in front of Big Ben. And if you take a picture in front of Big Ben, you'll have the London Eye in the background behind you. To get to the London Eye, you have to take a short walk across a bridge, and from the bridge, you can see the London Bridge. Westminster Abbey is kind of a false name for the building. A long time ago, it was an abbey and at one point even a cathedral. However, since 1560, it is neither. It's now just a church. It's the largest religious building in the city, but it's still just a church. Something many people don't know is that Big Ben is the name of the bell inside of the tower. The tower is actually called the Elizabeth Tower. What I think is interesting about this is that only residents of the United Kingdom are allowed to go up in it and tour it. Overseas visitors are not allowed. The London Eye is basically a huge Ferris wheel. It has huge pods that you can fit about 30 people in and takes about 30 minutes to go all the way around. On the outside of the pods, there are different flags of all the different countries, but they skip number 13 when labeling them because 13 is bad luck. Something you can't see from that general vicinity, though, is the National Art Gallery, Piccadilly Circus, and a Harry Potter park was where they filmed Diagon Alley. The National Gallery was really neat. It had a ton of paintings and artists' work that I learned about in art class in high school. They weren't just random people you've never heard of before. My favorite painting in the whole gallery was Starry Night by Vincent van Gogh. Piccadilly Circus was basically like a smaller version of Times Square in New York. It had the walls that had electronic billboards that flashed different ads and pictures and videos, and there were street performers and street vendors everywhere. Walking through the city, I was exposed to a lot of England's culture. Most people were dressed in dark, solid color clothing and were speed walking. A lot of people were on their phones, but I don't know anywhere that doesn't have people who aren't. It wasn't until we were at the National Art Gallery until I actually spoke to a local. From my accent, he knew I wasn't from anywhere near England and immediately pulled out red, white, and blue string from his bag. He asked me to hold out my finger, and as he braided the string into a bracelet, he asked me how long I was staying, where I was from, and how I liked it here. The thing that he said that stuck with me the most is as he tied the string around my wrist. He looked at me and said, "This is for my Miss America," and he smiled. This gives me cold chills thinking about how raw humanity and humility seemed to me at that moment, and this man will forever make London have a special place in my heart.